Henry C. Roberts, who built his home in the very mouth of the canyon in 1859, and for whom Roberts Canyon is named, had been closely associated with the life of the San Gabriel Canyon since the first American miners came in 1861. Roberts built a store and log cabin on the mesa 14 miles above Azusa, which was to become internationally famous as Follows Camp. There he ran a general store, buying the gold from the miners at $17 per ounce and supplying them with whatever they required. This building is one of the few in the entire canyon which survived the 1862 flood and is still in use. No doubt the oldest existing structure in the region. Now Roberts watched the steady stream of nuggets which came to his scales from the Cecil Graham Hill claim immediately across the river, and finally he decided to take that property over and exploit it on a large scale with hydraulic machinery. At about this time, William G. Ferguson, Los Angeles pioneer and prosperous owner of the Fashion Livery Stables on North Main Street, commenced to install hydraulic equipment on mining properties adjoining the Roberts properties to the west. It became a race between the crews of Roberts and those of Ferguson as to which would first complete the ditches and flumes required to bring the water of the river from 6 miles upstream to the artificial lakes constructed in ravines high above the mines. Volume and pressure thus acquired was necessary to force the water from the hydraulic nozzles with sufficient power to tear away the high gravel bars and wash rocks, gravel, and clay down through the long sluice boxes and over the riffles where the heavy gold could be trapped. The building of these ditches, which can still be traced along the mountain sides, was a stupendous undertaking. Dams were built to divert the water into settling basins where the sand, which would have clogged the ditches, was removed. Conduits and tunnels were blasted and hewn from the rock walls of the canyon, flumed on steel supports driven into sheer cliffs, carried on high trestles across gulches and canyons, through clay-lined ditches across high mesas, and all at a steady, gentle gradient which raised the water in relationship to the rapidly descending level of the river. Then brought it into the storage lakes above the gravel bars to be attacked. The Roberts Ditch ran along the north and west canyon walls, while that of Ferguson skirted the south and east sides. Finally, the laborers, men from Mexico, men from China, and from the Hawaiian Islands, and even American Indians, working under their American bosses, completed their labors. Lakes were full, the monitors ready, the long sluice boxes installed, and hydraulic mining began in the fall of 1870. For the next 3 years, in spite of never-ending trouble with flumes and the fact that their crude methods retained only the coarsest gold pieces, these two hydraulic companies recovered each an average of $1,000 per month. Small-scale miners have ever since mined the tailings of these hydraulic workings, often recovering more gold per cubic yard than was taken out by the original exploiters. Roberts refused an offer in the summer of 1873 of $250,000 for his holdings. So confident was he that a bonanza was just before him. The offer was made by a Chinese dignitary known as Captain Jack, who purportedly was the head of the San Francisco Tong, which supplied the Chinese laborers in the mines. The dignified Oriental came to the mines by carriage, wearing his silk embroidered robes and surrounded by his attendants and bodyguards, and carrying the cash for the transaction, which Roberts turned down. He soon regretted his optimism, for that fall, as they worked deeper into the Great Red Bar, which still looms above the canyon, they constantly broke into old holes, tunnels, and chambers from which the pay dirt had been removed by earlier miners. Then in 1874, Valley residents secured a court injunction against hydraulic mining. This was soon followed by state laws designed to prevent the pollution of domestic water supplies. Harassed by adverse state laws, hydraulic operations in the state of California came to a close in 1882. The law ruled in effect that the orchards and fertile fields of the foothills were of more value to the state and the nation than the gold secured by the miners. It was also irrefutable against the miners that gold was a one-time crop, and the land thus used was doomed to an eternity as a rock pile, infertile and cruel. As you can see from the sign behind me, we're standing at the entrance to Camp Williams. Jim Williams founded this camp in the year 1913. It's about 3.9 miles from the East Fork Bridge. This thriving little settlement has a restaurant, store, trailer park, and camp and picnicking areas. Camp Williams is managed by Dan and Patty Burris. Dan and Patty are some of the nicest people you'll run into in the canyon. And also, I believe, they serve the best hamburger in the canyon. From this point on upstream for about 6 or 8 miles is where most of the present gold mining is taking place. This area is closed to mineral entry, which means you can't file a claim, but is open to recreational gold mining. You can sluice or dry wash or dredge between here and Cattle Canyon Bridge. The Cattle Canyon Bridge is about 1.5 miles upstream. It's the big white bridge where Cattle Canyon comes into the East Fork. It's clearly marked on the map that accompanies this video. You cannot use a dredge above Cattle Canyon Bridge, but you can pan and sluice. Our next stop is going to be about 1/4 mile upstream, where we'll look at an area which has produced a lot of gold. This area has always produced gold. The majority of the gold is up on the sides of the canyon. As you look up, you can see the old river deposits. Gold can be found in any one of the canyons going up into this deposit. I was talking to an old gentleman that lives at Camp Williams, and he told me he took 7 ounces of gold out of this area in the early 1970s. Allegedly, the Los Angeles Times ran an article soon thereafter, and a mini gold rush followed, and Mr. Williams' Canyon was soon cleaned out. I also heard a story about a man who dredged 2 pounds of gold out of this area, where the bedrock is close to the surface. There's also an area up here called Gold Gulch, where several ounces of gold was removed 2 or 3 years ago. I know this to be a fact because I was one of the people involved. We found a spot that had been missed by the old timers, and we took over 2 ounces of gold out of a spot about 10 by 10 feet.